Joining me in studio, a very special guests, and no strangers to our screens. They're always looking dapper, and you see them everywhere. They are socialites and fashionistas, Alan and Krishen, and we're going to be chatting about what was hot and not, and on and off point at SA Fashion Week Spring Summer 2015. Hi guys, and welcome to the show.
Hi,
Thank you.
So it's always good to be in your presence. I mean, you guys look fabulous, and we are talking about all things fashion because SA Fashion Week Spring Summer 2015. There's a lot to talk about. Tell me, what were your highlights and what really stood out for you guys?
Well, there were some really amazing high points. It's not yet over, but there have been some really amazing high points thus far. One of those has been Krishen. You know, he's one of our top South African designers at the moment, and he's always pushing the envelope. His inspiration this time was atrocities committed against women, and he looked at one of the youngest winners of the Nobel Peace Prize, and he brought that beautifully across. So in terms of the execution of the collection, it was really amazing.
Alan, what was your opinion on Kat? Because everyone's talking about his collection.
Yes. Well, you see, I mean, fashion's always been perceived as something that is frivolous and unimportant. But when you get something like Kat's range, where he's actually researched what he wants to do 6 months in advance, and he's actually put a message behind the range and brought it forward onto the runway, I mean, it just gives fashion something that is a little bit less frivolous and has a bit of more meaning to it. So just in that context, I think the range was fantastic, and it had a message which was important.
I love that you guys, instead of just talking about aesthetics, which is what most people just want to do, you know, it's, yes, this look nice and that look, and that's great because that's what fashion is all about. You picked on the message behind it and the inspiration, and the fact that you mentioned that fashion is always perceived as something frivolous. Now, another designer whose showcase and collection I think is also a talking point is Craig Jacobs, and he's someone who also pushes himself a bit, because when I chatted to Jensu, she was like, you know, one of his shows there was F-bombs everywhere, and I was like, what's going on? But you know, we chatted about his collection, and it was a sportswear range, and that also had a meaning behind it. Yes. What were your thoughts on his collection?
Well, it's something that myself and Alan are always quite conscious about, is what is the message behind it, because like Alan has just said, people perceive fashion as frivolous, but in fact, if you think about the thought that has actually gone into it and the thought process behind it, sometimes you see that it's not so frivolous at all. So Craig Jacobs, a fantastic example. He's now recently, you know, doing this new diffusion line, which is a sportswear line called Be Seen. And what's really clever about it is that he's using fabric technology, so reflective fabrics, you know, all of these Lumo fabrics. And the main idea is from a safety point of view. So, you know, on a dark street, you can be seen because of the fabric that you're wearing, and that's actually bringing in more of the safety consciousness behind it, which is quite important in South Africa at this point in time. So we love the fact that there's so much thinking that goes into it. It's not just sportswear, it's sportswear with a conscience.
But was that the platform to showcase that collection? What do you guys think about that?
I think the other range, his sort of high style range, possibly was better for the runway, although I think that was the platform to get that message across. But what I quite liked about it is it was just like a minute part of the show, so it didn't take over his entire show. So that for me was a good point.
Now, whilst we mention designers that we all know about and that are really pushing boundaries in South Africa and making quite a name for themselves, there were some new designers that also were quite impressive. How did you guys feel about some of the new ones? I know there was House of Alfalfa, African Swiss, Urban Zulu. Any of the new designers stand out for you?
Well, I think in South Africa at the moment we're so lucky because we've got all of this young creative talent, and what's so great about the young creative talent is that they are pushing the boundaries. They've got all of this creative potential and they're not afraid to play with it. So we loved what African Swiss did with denim. You know, they had lots of deconstructed denim, and that was really amazing to see. And there was also the Lufthansa First Collections show, and we saw the winner of that was Yada Exclusive Designs, also a new up-and-coming designer. And what's so fantastic with her range is that it's very retail ready. So in terms of getting it into retail spaces, she actually is going to develop that platform further. So we've got all of this amazing talent, which is really encouraging.
I mean, for me, it's quite interesting in what you were saying about the fabrics, because I come actually from a fabric background, and a lot of designers don't actually know how to use the new fabrics, the new technologically advanced fabrics. So we saw at some other fashion weeks and in some of the shows this year how the techniques that are being used overseas, they're trying to translate into our local collections, but they're just not using the right fabric. Yeah. So you're finding that even while it's on the runway, the laser cutouts, what have you, are tearing, whereas it shouldn't be that fabric that was used, it should be something else. So I think that's something we still need to be quite aware of.
Now, we've mentioned a lot of high points. Any low points that stood out for you?
Well, I think, sometimes, as Ellen has just mentioned, when we go to a fashion show, we do want a little bit of drama, we do want a little bit of a show, and for certain collections that we've seen, they've been quite flat. So, many of the items that have come out have looked very much the same, and there hasn't really been any factor to engage us, anything to capture our attention and think, oh, wow, this is really something that we want to look at, something that we want to watch. And I do think designers do need to be conscious of that as well, because from the first piece that you send out, you need to get everybody's attention, and then you need to end on a high note as well. We've noticed that many of the last items in the show is usually quite a low point in some of the shows, and it needs to be a showstopper. We use that word for a reason.
Yes, a showstopper. That's very true. Now, you guys are seen everywhere together. Do you ever, at any point, tell each other, why are you wearing that? That is not working. Please be honest and tell me, because you have distinct styles.
Yes, so there are days when Alan will put on a certain outfit and I will say to him, you are not leaving the house in that. Change immediately. You cannot be seen in public in that. And he'll tell me that too.
He can be very mean when he wants to be.
Thank you guys so much for joining us and chatting about Fashion Week and sharing your trends and whatever's on your mind. And we wish you guys all the best with your own endeavors, which is, I know, doing really well. So we hope to see you at another fashion event and another entertainment event very soon.
You most
Thank you
certainly
very
will
much.
see us.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us.